Hi, welcome to the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. I'm Doug O'Brien, and today I'll be talking about storytelling. But I'm going to be actually talking about storytelling in a slightly different way than I have before because the new book has finally arrived. We have a launch to do here. We're going to be putting this thing out into the world, and I want you to be the first to know about it. Now, I'm going to be giving you some bits of information from the book so that you can get a head start. It's actually the most important part about the book, actually, is how did you tell a good story? There's part of the book that is about the history of storytelling. It's all in there. But the most important part, as far as I'm concerned, and perhaps you as well, is how can you take this information and make yourself a better storyteller? Because that is ultimately what it is all about. And that's what we want to do for us, all of us together right now. So here's the introduction credits, and then I'll see you on the other side. You are listening to the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast, a show devoted to uncovering the systems and the secrets that set the best apart, where you learn how to take your coaching clients to the next level, while you grow the coaching practice of your dreams. So sit back and relax, or sit up and get excited. Either way, you might want to pay attention. This could be important. So welcome back. Yes, storytelling. Everyone does it. Everyone loves it. It's a great thing. It's all around us. And how do you get better at it? How do you get good at storytelling? It's really important as a coach to tell stories and have them be, of course, relevant to the coachee that you're coaching, so how to have them learn something from a story. That's how Milton Erickson did it. That's how it's been done since the beginning with Aesop's fables. And before that, although there's not a lot of recorded history before that, nevertheless, it's been around since before recorded history. It's how storytelling is what we do as human beings. So how do you get good at it? It seems like some people are just naturally gifted with the gift of gab, the gift of blarney. They can tell stories. I remember Frank Fairley once saying, it's like the most important thing is to be born Irish. And I don't know if that's really true. But I think it cuts across all nationalities, everything. People love stories. And you might be a naturally born storyteller. That's great. Good for you. Happy for you. And if you're not, as I am not, I've always admired them, but I had to work at it in order to get any good at all. Excuse me, a little cookie crumb in my mouth, my throat. I made the mistake of making some really delicious cookies for Christmas, and I can't stop eating them. Oh, well. But fortunately, they'll be gone soon. and then I can go back on my diet. But anyway, I digress. The thing about storytelling is that you can get good at it. There's a skill to it. There's a structure to it. Just like anything like piano playing, you can learn it and get better at it. And that is the point to this book, this user's guide to storytelling. There's lovely stories in it about people who have been good storytellers in the past, Mark Twain and Edgar Allan Poe. There's lots of people from the past, Shahrazad's in there, But the second half of the book is all about you and how do you tell your stories and make them better and have them be ready for you when you want to do it as a coach or anybody else, So we're going to take a look at that today. So I'm going to give you some of what I think I've discovered as kind of the essential things to really know about a story. And we'll go from there. There's more than just we can cover today, but I'm going to give you this little bit as well. So what I've discovered also is that on this little podcast thing, I can do this. I can add diagrams. I can add visuals. Now, if you're listening to this as an auditory podcast, I apologize. You have to just buy the book, I guess, won't you? So just see, I don't know what page this is. I can't tell you a page number. For those of you who are looking at your book at home to try to follow along auditorily, it is approximately page 80-something. 86. We're looking at page 86 in your book. If you'd open your hymnals to page 86, please. So stories have a structure. I learned this from Joseph Campbell years ago, not from him directly, but a recording he did, a video he did with on PBS with Bill Moyers. It was an exceptional series of things about myth and the myths of man. Brilliant, brilliant thing. But he said, that a mythological journey, a hero's journey, always starts with somebody who is starting in a particular place. They're living in their village. They're kind of an ordinary thing. And then something casts them into this journey, this epic journey. Maybe they've been chosen to do it. Maybe they chose to do it themselves. Maybe they were thrust into it, but somehow or other they got onto this thing. They make this journey and then they come back. There's a returning. So there's a starting, a journey, and a return. So that's the basic structure of any story. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. So that's the beginning, middle, and end of our journeys. We want to do this. We want to have this in our stories. We want to have it be so that there's a beginning. So you can see here on the little thing that we want to start with a good starting point. Basically, you set the scene of what's happening, where are you, who are you, etc. in this little moment in your life. What's going on, who are the players, where are you? Paint a picture as much as you can using, visually stimulating imagery so that people can sort of paint a picture in their mind of where you are. And there's stakes involved. There's some reason this is an important moment. There's something that's going on that you want in your story, that somebody wants. And then it's good to have a good opening line. You craft a good opening line. But then something happens, right? A bucolic little scene has taken place, but then something takes place, right? An inciting incident, they call it in story land. So there's an inciting incident, something happens, and it thrusts you off into this journey, right? Everything is fine. Living my life, all's good, but then suddenly, boom, you're cast off into this journey. So there's something happens, and then, it continues to happen, and then you return. So you kind of finish your story, wrap it up in a bow, as it says here in this little booklet thing. And that, of course, is the most simplistic kind of story structure you can have. But what I found in doing research and learning to be a relatively good storyteller, is that there's more to it than that. You can go a lot deeper than that. So in the book, we talk about this idea of spinning some things out, that you leave out the details. You leave out details that aren't important. Leave out the details that aren't important. You embellish the details that are important. And some things that maybe, you really spin out on a little bit to make it really very important, even though it might not have been that important when you first lived the story, So you have to kind of craft a story and embellish it and color it in a way that makes it interesting. And humor is good to use in that point as well. And then there's even a deeper structure than just the beginning, middle, and end idea. First elucidated by this guy named Freytag. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name exactly, but there you see a picture of him. And if you can figure out how to pronounce his name, then you're a better person than I am. It's probably something like Freytag. Anyway, that's his structure there. You see there's the beginning, and there's rising action and a climax, and then there's a falling action and a denouement. So yeah, that's pretty right. That's kind of the way stories go. Except that if you stop and think about it, if you listen to a story or read a story like this one, it'd be really boring, right? The climax of the story is in the middle. So you've got a 200-page book, and you're reading this 200-page book, and 100 pages in, it's like, there's the most important thing that has happened. The climax of the story is 100 pages in, and now you've got another 100 pages to wind back down again. Well, that's not very exciting. That's actually a pretty boring story, and I think probably you wouldn't finish that book, or you'd walk out of that movie, right? It's not really great, honestly. But it's a good idea, and it's a good thing to sort of think about those elements of the story. There's different ways of putting it. And there's a wonderful this thing that you can Google this on YouTube or whatever and watch it if you want to. I'll show you these forms. Kurt Vonnegut does this wonderful lecture once about story structures. And he talks about 3 different story structures, and he maps them out on a chalkboard. It's a delightful little thing. Um, I actually have if you were to by any chance buy the book, there is a free class, online video class similar to this, me talking to the camera. But it was live. I taught it to students who were on live with Zoom, and I taught this class. And I showed the video from YouTube of Kurt Vonnegut describing these different stories. So there's one that's called Man Gets into a Hole, but that's kind of just the old way of referring to it, and it doesn't have to be about a man, doesn't have to be about a hole. But the idea is metaphorical, that somebody who's walking along gets into a hole and then gets back out of it again. It's the structure of the story. People love that story. So that's one structure that you can use. Another structure is, again, over the years in the past, it's been called Boy Meets Girl. But it doesn't have to be about a boy, it doesn't have to be about a girl, it doesn't have to be about any of those things. But the idea is that a person starts off at a certain place, finds something wonderful, then loses it, and then gets it back again. Great story structure there, Boy Meets Girl. And then there's finally the Cinderella story, which is also wonderful. And you know what? You should just Google the thing. Kurt Vonnegut on story structure. You'll be glad you did. It's a very lovely description. There's even one, I believe, in Spanish. It's Spanish subtitles, so you could watch it that way if that's your primary language. But as great as these are, there's perhaps an even better one that perhaps can use these same stories, and it could be still Cinderella, and it could be, any of these other stories, but has perhaps a slightly more refined story structure to it that makes it even, dare I say, even better. And that comes from my friend Seth Barish. Seth is a Broadway director in New York City, and he's also the director of the Barrow Group in New York City. And this is his story structure. If you notice, it has a similar arc to Freytag's arc, but it's lopsided, right? So the climax doesn't come in the middle; it comes way at the end. In fact, probably this diagram, as you see it there on the page, is not quite accurate. It probably should come like right before the end, and then boom. So the ending, the denouement, whatever that Freytag would have, is just seconds. And it's a really great description when Seth describes it as kind of analogous to the story of The Wizard of Oz, which again is getting some popularity these days with Wicked and a retelling of it. But in The Wizard of Oz, if you can think about that story, it starts with sort of setup where Dorothy's living in Oz and everything's nice, it's fine, everything's good. And then there's an inciting incident. Her dog, a little dog Toto, bites Miss Gulch, who's the local librarian, and she's a nasty woman. And she wants to have the dog taken and put down, have it be destroyed because it bit her. So that's the inciting incident. Dorothy doesn't want her dog to be destroyed. So Toto escapes, and Dorothy grabs it and runs off. And that's the inciting incident. She runs off and has these adventures. Then this stuff happens. There's all this buildup of stuff. So there's spinning out of stuff. There's a tornado comes. She's transported to Oz. She meets the Cowardly Lion and all those other different people. She finally gets to the Wizard of Oz, or she thinks is the Wizard of Oz. But then there's this really interesting thing called the point of no return, which is where it builds up to a climax, almost to a climax, but then something happens that's unexpected, and it's a point of no return. And for the Wizard of Oz story, it's where Dorothy is thinking she's going to go back to Kansas, but this charlatan, this guy who's not really a wizard at all, flies off in a hot air balloon that he has no control over. And she's stuck. She's stuck in Oz. She's never going to get home, never going to get back. But then finally, there's this big reveal in the point of the story. So this arc goes up to this point, right? And so this is the point of the story. The point of the story at the top of this arc is the climax. And in this case, it is the thing that is actually where the title comes from as well, The Wizard of Oz. Dorothy is the Wizard of Oz. Glenda the Good Witch comes, says, no, it's not him, it's you. You're the one. You're the one with the power. You've always had the power. You just didn't know you had the power. This is a very Ericksonian story. You've got the power. All you have to do is click your heels together and say, there's no place like home. And suddenly your magic will make it happen. And you go back to Oz. Dorothy's the Wizard of Oz. That's the big climax. That's the point of the story. And then it's over. 90 seconds later, roll credits. The movie is done. She's back in Kansas. You were there and you were there. It's just over. So that's that final piece. This is really what it's all about. If you can structure your story like this, you're going to be golden in whatever context it is, whether it's therapy or whether it's, doing a keynote speech at some conference or whatever it is. If you use this structure, promise it's going to work. It works every time, every time, every time. It's almost like the structure of a joke, really, when you think about it. The punchline, right? Why bother talking anymore after the punchline? It's kind of over. So it's kind of the same thing. One of the most successful storytellers in the world of the Moth, I don't know if you know the Moth, but the Moth is a storytelling venue in the United States, but also other parts of the world as well. It's growing and it's really incredibly popular. A man who's won it more than I think anybody, a man named Matthew Dix, has this thing in his book this book is called Storyworthy. And he describes his main event, his main thing that happens, he calls the 5-second moment. And this is my little description of it from my book, which is this 5-second moment is just like Seth's saying, it is the point to the story. So in all of our stories, we want to have it be so that this beginning, middle, and end thing has a change takes place. That you, as the protagonist of telling the story, or whoever it is that is the main character of the story, they change. They start off as this little hobbit, right? But then they go on this grand quest and with a ring, and then they come back as this hero. But they're a different person. The world is different because this thing has taken place. This learning, this realization has happened, right? So this 5-second moment is this little moment where like, whoa, some realization takes place, right? Some learning happens, some change takes place. So this 5-second moment is the point to the story. This is really kind of perfectly synonymous with Seth Barish's point to the story thing, with this climax happening right there by the end. So again, if you can find that 5-second moment for your story, that's what's really it's going to be about. Okay? So that's what I want to leave you with in this little episode of the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. Now, if you can do all this stuff, your storytelling will take a dramatic turn towards the better, or you might even start competing with Matthew Dix in some of these Moth story slams. So that's my gift for you here. Hopefully that you'll use it and with good purpose in mind and have a lot of fun doing it. Storytelling is a wonderful thing. I really hope that you enjoy this book. I hope you enjoy this podcast, and I hope you enjoy all of the stories that you tell and hear going forward. Thanks a lot. This has been the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure seeing you again. Hope to see you again real soon. Come back next week when we have another gripping and exciting episode of the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. And if you want to, you can find out more about us, each and every one of us, at essentialcoachingskills.com. Thanks.